Good morning and welcome to your Daily Game Face. I am Dr. Kim Lannon. I am here with Lou.
Hello.
I'm late.
Yeah, well,
I was having a conversation in the car,
can happen.
and so I was late. So there it is, right? I had a very lovely weekend.
Did you?
Did you?
I did.
Did
actually.
you? Did you? Was it nice here? Because I was away.
I honest to God, I forget.
Oh, so you're just lying?
No, I forget what the weather was like. You're asking me what the weather was like.
I think that there was some nice weather here and some not so nice. But I was in Minnesota, and
That's right.
And it was cold. There was one very
Didn't look cold.
Oh, it was. It was 40 degrees during the day in the mornings,
Wow.
and it felt like 34. There was one day where the wind was whipping really hard.
Yeah.
And it was cold.
Sounds like what we got yesterday and the day before, probably the same system.
Yeah, it was just like, whoa. And then there was one really nice, beautiful sunny day on Sunday that was like 60 plus degrees.
Yeah.
And I was sitting amongst 350 cats on the ground, letting them walk all over me and having a great time at Furball Farm Cat Sanctuary in Faribault, Massachusetts, Faribault, Minnesota. And it was lovely. And I got to see all the lovely wildcat sanctuary cats because I was there because I'm a founding member of Catio Town there. So we had our big grand opening / all the cats are in, and I got to see all the cats that are in my little section.
How many cats did you think there were?
In Catio Town?
That you had contact with, that you were around.
Oh, on the weekend?
Yeah.
Oh, I was around probably 500 cats altogether.
Holy cow.
I was around 350 that I could touch, and then I was around 140 that I couldn't.
You're allergic to cats, aren't you?
Yeah. I didn't have any problem though. I did worry, but actually I was around more than that because then I went to the zoo. And so I was around more than that. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
On Monday, I was at the zoo. Minnesota Zoo is very nice, even though I'm not a big zoo fan. Yeah. It is one of the nicer zoos because they have a lot of space. I did do a complaint though. I don't normally do a complaint, but I did do a complaint.
At the zoo?
I did.
Okay.
But after, in the survey,
right.
the Amur leopard was doing a pacing stress walk around in circles and trying to get someone's attention. So I had to put it in my survey because it was upsetting to me that the Amur leopard has sort of a smaller enclosure, and he or she, I don't know what it is, was doing a stress walk, and it was stressing me out. Given that when I come from Wildcat Sanctuary or when I was working down at Big Cat Rescue or doing all those things, you just come to know what a stress walk is and like what an anxiety thing in a cat is. And no one was paying attention, and it was very bothersome.
Okay,
as a behaviorist.
This is only semi-related, and I hate taking you into the woods, but have you seen the story about the orcas, the stranded orcas? Is it France?
I think so. I think, yes. I did.
It's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
How can you leave those animals there?
Oh, I have stories of things that are terrible.
It's horrifying.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the thing with this? Well, yeah.
And they got dolphins there, too?
Well, I was going to say there's a whole bunch of different stuff. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable.
Because people.
Yeah.
It's a people thing. If Paula, my friend Paula, who is up in Minnesota with me, and Galen, and Leanne, who was there, but I didn't get to see her, who usually is listening. I think I must have said, like, I dislike people this weekend a lot because of people that were doing terrible. People do awful things, and I don't dislike all people. I just was disliking some people.
But France is like the civilized world. I mean, how can you sleep at night walking away from that place with those animals there? I mean, not that I know how you'd actually move them.
That's why I said that it's hard not to not like people sometimes because it's a people thing. It's. You just said, like, how do you sleep at night?
And people work there.
Right.
And again, it's not a third world country. It's France, for crying out loud.
I know. Well, now I'll have to get on that bandwagon today. But this is why I like the places I go to, because the people are awesome. And so there are great people out there. But like to your point, there's these places and other things that, are not so great. And it's not because of the animals, it's because of the people. And there's, a certain type of person that just, So I always go into, there's a mental health issue there. In my mind, it's like, it's mentally not right.
It would have to be a mass mental health issue.
Well, you get into groupthink.
Yeah.
Right. Because like, if we go back to just looking at, I'll go back to cats. Like if we look at the Joe Exotics of the world, right? Mm-hmm. Joe Exotic loved, air quote, loved cats, but he really doesn't. It was a moneymaker for him. So he got everyone around him that loved cats to buy into his culty thing. And then it turned into this terrible thing where they were killing them and like using them for, like, it was terrible. Yeah. So it's a mental health issue, and especially with big exotic animals, like whales and dolphins and, leopards and tigers and bears and all that stuff. People just, they lose their minds. And then you get like-minded people together that buy into like a certain type of like, oh, we're going to do this for conservation, or we're doing this for the, when in fact, it's a pay to play scheme, or it's a, pet the tiger or swim with the dolphins, or, when I was in New York City a couple of weeks ago, and I was with Kristen, there was this lovely set of parrots out on the street in Times Square with this guy with a big snake, right? And she's like, oh, I just want to touch. I'm like, well, you're going to have to pony up $40 to touch those. And she's like, oh, is that a pay to play thing? I'm like, yeah, don't pay to play. Yeah. Because it's, I know it's probably feeding his animals and all that and himself, but it's still perpetuating the fact that here these animals are being held hostage essentially when they don't need to be. But on another note, it was a wonderful weekend because I did get to be around all the children. It was really good. It was a great experience. And now I'm back to it's cold here. So I went from cold here, went there, it was cold, came back and it's still cold. What is going on? It's May 21st.
No, I think we should all go out and idle our cars.
I did.
While we're in here.
Oh.
If we can turn the temperature up, let's turn it up.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. But anyway, I was going to just say that I think it's a very, if you have anything in your life that is, makes you feel good and you're in that. So this is part of the year of me, but I'd always do this stuff like the philanthropy and just, a give back. I work with people, so I don't give back more to people. I do it for other things. So my philanthropy is always, I'm either doing the New England Patriots, which gives to lots of different things, or I'm doing animal work. So I love it. And it's wonderful. And it was very restful and peaceful to do that because it's, soothing to be able to know you're doing a good thing.
And you get a chance to drop everything else for a while. Just hang with the cats.
Exactly. And just hang or hang at the zoo. The Minnesota Zoo, I can't give enough plugs to because they have this amazing, I walked 8 miles at the zoo in 3 hours because they have this treetop thing that goes around, and it's just a big walkway that goes above all the enclosures, and you can see down into all the animals. It's really cool. Oh, wow. And it was beautiful. It was very windy, but it was a very beautiful day, and I had a very nice time doing that. But getting your, so this is in the spirit of the year of you, the month of you, May, the growth month, is making sure you take care of you, making sure you get out there and do what you need to do for you. And whatever that is, it's, it doesn't have to be these things that I do. It's just, like I say, set your intention for the day. Start with something just basic, or what you want to accomplish for the day. And if you have a bigger thing, like you want a trip or you want to go somewhere, or you want to do something this weekend because it's a long weekend, set that intention to make sure you do that. So you have something to look forward to, but also so that you're fulfilling yourself for you. And this year of you thing has really sprouted and grown a lot of people that ask me or write to me and have been, saying like, oh, I'm doing this thing. Does that count? Everything counts. If you feel that you're doing something good for you, it counts. And so, it doesn't, I'm no judge and jury of like whether or not you find it important for you. If you feel it's important for you and you're doing it and it feels accomplishing, or it feels like it's fulfilling, or it gives you a sense of peace, yay. Everybody's different. So you do that for you and it gives you that sense of peace. One of the things I was telling a couple people last week, it was like a theme that came up after the show, because we were talking about, which I was going to talk about today, but sort of, I'm going to be probably a little bit more jumbled because I have so much different stuff going on, but, and hopefully come back to it, but just like the different types of complementary therapies. We were talking about, all the different types, and I hadn't gotten to all of them, but, a complementary therapy, literally, we were laughing about the fact that it's advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just
Right.
like, it's not really a therapy modality, but it's a technique, essentially, is complement yourself by advocating for yourself,
I
giving
like that,
yourself
a technique, a mindset.
right.
Yeah.
It's about because when I left last week, I was thinking about, complementary versus complement, right? Different spelling, but yet
Yeah.
they're, and being able to actually advocate for yourself, because so many people do not advocate for themselves, and they will take themselves and put themselves second and third, or they're satisfied with the fact that they're getting feedback that's always encouraging them to do more for others, and then sacrificing themselves, and then not speaking up for themselves, or saying no. Or somebody came up with a story last week, and whatever they did, they had a hard no, like as a full sentence, and they got a lot of pushback on it, so they ended up crumbling and making it a yes instead, because the guilt and the push and the pressure. And I was like, you can still say no, but they feel so bad about it. Which is a variety of reasons of why they feel so bad about that, because it's upbringing and like a set mindset of like what it means and what you think it means to others, and how you think you're being seen by others, and interpretation. So, but I would highly stress this week that the next week, because we only have X amount of days left in May, is, if you want to sprout and grow, advocate for yourself. Spend an intentional day of making sure you're advocating for yourself. And that can come in a lot of varieties of what's going on, whether it's at a doctor's office, whether it's with like a credit card company, whether it's calling budget rental car because they overcharged you. There's mine, right? Yeah. Just being able to say what you need to say. But here's the thing about that. And this is what I was telling people last week: compliment yourself by doing advocacy, but knowing that, don't have an expectation that it's going to change someone else, right, or change an outcome for them. It's going to change you. If you advocate for yourself and you get to speak your mind, sometimes that's all that needs to happen for you. When people stuff it down and they don't grow because they're essentially they're growing inward and going into the weeds, essentially, if we have a visual on that. If you're not advocating and you're not saying your piece, and you have an expectation that if you do, it will change things, don't have the expectation it will change. Right. Just have the expectation that I got to say what I needed to say, and it's out there.
That's the accomplishment.
That's the accomplishment.
Yeah.
And that's such a hard concept for people to have to grow with, because we're such the mindset in our culture of resolve means having something change.
A win.
Yeah. Having a win. Yeah. And it's not about a right or wrong or a win. It's about, I'm just going to get to say what I need to say. And I would love for there to be a change, but I don't have the hope that there'll be a change. And people hold on to this hope that hopefully this time. And that's not how it happens. And it's just, you can't change someone else. Yep. You can't give an example of like people venting, people, calling to vent in their sessions, or coming in and venting. And I will often say, are you venting, or do you want me to like give you feedback? Yeah. And most of the time people say, I just want to vent, because they don't expect a change. So I will just listen. And then sometimes I'll offer something up, but sometimes somebody will say, well, okay, now that I vented, well, what do you think? Right. And so I always start with, did it make you feel better?
Yeah. And
usually it's yes. And I'm like, do you need more than that? So it's really being able to do that for yourself of, do you need more than that? Because, and sometimes people will say, well, I need so-and-so to change, or I need them not to do that. And I'm like, that I can't help you with.
See, I was raised Irish and Italian.
I know.
And we have to address this because in the Irish and Italian cultures, there's a martyr syndrome. Yeah.
We got to come up with a name for it, like a cultural name for it.
But it's not exclusive to us, but we're really good at it.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are people who just like to complain.
Uh-huh.
They don't advocate for themselves because they almost value the
complaint,
the martyr syndrome,
right,
more than they want the change in the behavior.
Right. Well, and so in my world, I call that, and so do a lot of people in psychology, the help rejecting complainer. So you get cultured in, or you get taught how to just, you don't really look for an outcome that's change worthy. You just want to complain and then complain about how you haven't gotten the help.
Recognition as a victim.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't play that game. So, right. And that's really hard for people that are used to doing that. And one of the things I'll say to people is, if you're going to complain and you're going to vent and you're not going to do anything for yourself to change your status of how you feel, then you only have 5 minutes to complain.
Yeah.
And, because you take away, especially when you've got like kids and teenagers that are doing it, you say, I'm taking away your complaining rights because you're making a choice here to sit in it. Unfortunately, I do have tons of adults that do that. And that's where it creates an internal adversity to oneself. You know how relationships can be adverse, but a lot of times people have a self relationship that is adverse because they have negative self-talk. They have these they have the martyring to themselves because the outside is, the influences of the old tapes from your Irish Italian upbringing is there. You go inward and you just do, you self-sabotage, you gaslight yourself. You do all these things in lieu of having other people do it to you. You will do it to yourself. And then you can destroy other relationships from even forming for yourself or having growth in your day-to-day life because you turn inward adversely on yourself.
Yeah.
And people do that all the time. And that's why the advocacy piece is so important, because if you can advocate for yourself and speak up and just say, no, thank you, or don't do that, or that makes me uncomfortable, or whatever it is.
This is the basics of, we talk about this all the time about taking a hand off the wheel, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like being a victim is, I'm not responsible for my outcome.
Right.
And what you need to do is learn to take accountability for your outcomes and understand you have power with your outcomes.
And people don't, well, yes. So all
but people
those things,
don't want that responsibility.
Well, people don't, I don't know if it's just that they don't want it. It's also people don't know that they have it. They have the ability. So I think we start there. People don't know that they have the ability or the actual space to do that, because that's not what we're really taught. We're not taught that we can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, truly. So when that's such a foreign concept to so many people, that if you can take your space and you can just allow yourself to have space and grace for yourself, that's a big thing. But people do not do that. They are afraid of it. It feels, I think, sometimes like a lot of work. I'm in my head thinking about like what people say to me, that's a lot of work.
Well, it's met with resistance quite often.
Well, because it's a lot of work. And
that resistance is work. Yeah.
Well, right. And that's what I say to people, is that you're doing work anyway, because the work that you're putting in to not do the work is still work, but it's going against you. And that, I get some people that get that. And then some people that kind of just look at me going,
what?
What does that mean? And we do the cycle. We repeat that cycle over and over and over again of, well, you're not doing that work. You're doing other work. And I talk about it as, you have growth paths, right? Yeah. So if you want the month to be about you, or the year to be about you, if you're in a growth, there's two. I always say there's two. There's more, but there's two for ease. All paths are hard. It's about, right? It's about, okay, do we take the path that we've been going on that's really hard, that keeps landing us in the mud puddle or going over the cliff, or we have to climb ourselves back out? Or do we take the other one that might be painful as well, and we might hit some of those bumps in the road, but it ends in a better position?
Yeah.
And people notoriously will go back to the road that has the cliff and has the hill and it has the mud puddle. And I say the other one has those things too, but the outcome on the other one will be better.
Yeah.
That's a hard concept.
Turtle.
Is what?
They prefer to turtle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And because it's easier, air quoting, it's easier. It's not easier. Yeah. Both paths are hard, no matter what you do in life. All things are hard, and you can do hard things. It's just
do you want the resistance externally, or do you want the resistance internally?
Right.
People will live with internal resistance.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's why, a lot of times when people say, I have to go to, this family event. No, and I always say, no, you don't.
Yep.
And people are like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, you don't.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, but people will be mad at me. I'm like, okay. Then you'll have to be uncomfortable and sit with that, because if you really don't want to go and you're only going to still have a bad feeling and then have resentment and then have anger or have a bad whatever it is that comes from it, is that worse or better than sitting uncomfortable that you might have someone that's upset that you didn't show? I mean, how many times do you know that you haven't showed up to things and people are just like, where's so-and-so probably? And then it goes away and then nobody thinks about it. Now, I do understand that because I grew up with how I grew up.
Yeah.
So I do know that people hold grudges for not showing or not doing. That's not a me issue. And people think, God, not everybody, but a lot of people who are grown in that space of like, you're supposed to show, it's obligation, you have to. And no, you don't have to do that. Out of respect, yes, sure, sometimes, but you are not required to do these things if it makes you feel uncomfortable. Or, if you're being selfish and you're not going because you just don't want to go, and all these things which can come up, right? Yeah. Well, then that's a thing that you have to feel and figure out on your own.
It's an equation you have to go
right.
through.
That's an equation you have to figure out. But if it's just like a general feeling of like, I don't want to put myself in a position where there's unhappiness, unhealthiness, or there's a feeling of toxicity, or there's mental strain, or it takes me 7 weeks to get out of the 1 hour that I have to spend with people. Like, those are legitimate things to really look at to say, how do I grow from this? I have a couple clients over the past year or two that have had those kinds of situations. And I actually thought they were going to go more towards maybe like getting away from the relationships. So what we did was we really got them away from them in a healthy way that was emotional, detached, to get them working on their own stuff so they could go back in and advocate in a better way so that their nose stood as nose, that they got comfortable with their own discomfort. And instead of it being like complete detachment, which a lot of people think it's all or nothing, they actually are back into the relationships, but on their terms. And they don't fall into the martyring and the guilting and all that stuff, because they know how to compartmentalize it and detach and put the boundary and the distance from it. Even though those things still happen, they don't get impacted as much because we've practiced the growth around, like, that's a person's issue that's trying to take the situation and make it into their own and make you feel bad and pull you with like the crab in the bucket. And so, sometimes you have to get out of the bucket, stay out of the bucket. And then when you come back, you just don't get back in the bucket.
That's a concept we talked about before. It gets to acceptance, right?
Yes.
It's a space. Okay, they're upset. I can't do anything about that.
Right.
That's them.
Right.
Yes. I've done the equation, and this is what I'm doing anyway. I accept that you're upset. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting. I have a like sort of a story that has lots of different moving parts that I was thinking about from this last week, that, someone who there's a person that I know that hasn't had someone in their life for like a long, like decade, like almost 2 decades, right? Very minimally, just like texts here or there, like little spurts of things here and there. But all of a sudden this person is asking like a big ask of the person to do something all of a sudden, as if like there's been no,
as if they've been tight all the time.
Right. Or as if that there's nothing to resolve out, or if there's nothing to talk about. Right. And so I know this person is struggling with the want to do it and help, but at the same time, how to let go of, well, clearly that other person's not going to address it. The person's acting as if like there's nothing, like there'd be no reason. Plus, at the same time, the person is sort of using a coping strategy of guilting, like, well, if you can't, I guess I could ask this other, like, and I keep saying, don't get pulled by the guilt, because it's not yours. It's not, you haven't done anything wrong. You saying yes or no, and the person I'm talking about hasn't committed yes or no to anything. They've just said, I haven't said yes and I haven't said no. I just need more details. So the person's trying to be good with their boundaries, but there's an adverse situation internally for them not to act like they used to with this person, of getting upset and getting pulled by their stuff and then acting out and lashing out, and then it becoming friction, because that's what the other person's definitely waiting for. The other person's waiting for the fight, setting it up for a fight, setting up for, you weren't there for me. You didn't take care of me. You weren't helpful. How dare you, all these things. And I'm like, just, think it through. You don't, and if it doesn't come to be and you didn't get to it and they wanted it on their timeline and it wasn't, like, that's not a you issue.
Yep.
But, here it is 20 years later, and the person is still sitting, even though they've done all this work, they're still sitting with the conflict of, how do I resolve this out so that I don't feel
that
bad?
They feel that remote heat and they're bothered by it. You have to kind of, again, accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And know that that's just part of that, and that you have to accept it, and it's going to be there because it's something that you either grew up with, or it's something that was trained into you, or you're used to having that with that person, and just knowing like, I don't have that anywhere else. So I'm going to put that in a compartment and really accept that this is who this person is. And I don't have to then jump in and be that way with that person. I can just do my thing and then get back to them when I need to and when I want to. And if it's not on their timeline and they get upset, that's not my problem.
Right.
Right. And I think that's really hard because you get a lot of feedback from, friends, family sometimes that will say, oh, that's so selfish of you. No, it's actually taking self-time. It's allowing yourself to not get pulled by something that no one else could possibly understand because you're not sitting in your shoes. They don't know what it's like,
right.
I grew up in an era where, especially females, you didn't say no. Everything was, of course, go dance at the Christmas party when you're 6 years old for the entire group of people that's sitting around drunk at the piano, right?
Yeah.
Because you're the entertainment. No. Right. Yeah. And that's what happens to little kids, right? Or, make sure you kiss Uncle Bob, make sure you're like, no, and all these psychological things that you come up with in your adulthood. And then you have to sit with and go, I'm supposed to say yes, or I'm supposed to not say no, or I'm supposed to be this thing so that no one gets upset with me. It's okay for someone to be upset with you. It's not you.
Well, for many people, that's a source of self-worth.
Right. Yes.
Because what they provide to other people.
And what those people think of them.
Right.
Right. And I always say for every person that thinks something poorly of you, there's going to be 5 others that think something great about you. Just because you say no does not mean you're a bad person.
But sometimes that's an internal problem where my worth is in being there for that person, or helping that person, or helping people, or
yes,
and I feel bad about myself not being able to provide that.
Right.
But it's okay. Sometimes it's okay. It's an equation.
Well, yeah. And I always say, I'm in a job of helping people. So I help people all the time. So when someone asks me for something and I have to say no, I say it because I can't. You know what I mean? I don't, and I do it sometimes because I can't physically, or I can't do it, period. And also, in addition to that, I also have to make sure I value my own time, and I have to say no because I have to value my own time, and I know what it's going to do to put me into that position and what it's going to create in my life. Yep. And that's not something that came naturally to me. That was something I had to move and switch around, like most people, through the same kinds of stuff that I teach my clients and the same, and my students. It's really being able to sit with, okay, where am I in this equation? And I count. Because a lot of times people feel like they don't count. And the only way they do count is like what you just said, is their worth is based on, well, I did this thing, so now that person's going to think I'm worthy. There's a great book that's called Will I Ever Be Good Enough?
Exactly.
And it's got a second part of the title, but if you look up Will I Ever Be Good Enough? And they have one for men and one for women. And the one that I use a lot in my class that I teach with, because I teach about how people can become addicts and also codependents, which is a relationship addiction, which I've talked about. It's Will I Ever Be Good Enough? Daughters of narcissistic mothers and sons of narcissistic mothers. And then they have one for fathers too. But it's always the mothers that get the bad rap, but it can be both. And so I make sure I highlight equal opportunity on both sides for that. But it's a really good read because it's that culture that we have of like, will you ever be good enough? And what happens to getting tethered in? Hi, Kate. Kate saying good morning.
And the problem with people who their self-worth is in their ability to help, are usually attracted to people in need. They tend to groom those types of relationships.
Well, so here's a growth piece for talk about internal adversity, right? And people say, how do you get out of like doing that? You have to know yourself better, and you have to really get to know yourself. And people think, oh, that's so weird and so cheesy and so cliche, but it's not. It's about, what do you know about yourself that pulls? In psychology, we call it pulling. What are you doing to pull for a certain type of person? We say things like, we pull for, to marry someone like our father or someone like our mother, right? If you don't like your mother or your father, or you didn't like growing up like that, you got to really know yourself well and know your relationships really, really well to be able to then not pull for that. And people don't usually do that by the time that they have their first big relationship or their first marriage, right? Because, or their only marriage, because some people do stay together, but then they regret it because they marry into the same thing that they were in, which was not healthy. And that's not to say everyone has a pull towards someone that's unhealthy, but most people pull towards something unhealthy because that's what we are. Yeah. We are just like attracted to, moths to the flame. And if
Why
you don't,
do I always get the same type of guy? You pull
exactly.
for them.
You pull for them. And people are like, what do you mean? So it's unconscious. It's not conscious. Right. We don't sit there and go, oh, that person. Because when people first get together, and this is one of the hard concepts about that, is when people first get together relationally, everything looks normal. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the year in that you go, oh shit, what I get myself into? It's not right at the beginning because everyone puts their best foot forward. So how do you unconsciously pull and still, and they looked fine. They looked normal. They looked healthy. They were lovely. They were kind. They were romantic. They were all these things. So this is where you get to know yourself better.
That's the front of the curtain.
That's the front of the curtain. Yeah. So you have to be able to know enough about yourself that how do you get to go behind the curtain? So there's a lot, it's very different for a lot of different people. So when I'm working with couples or if I work with relationships and someone's trying to build even friendships and they've had bad relationship friendships, right? Just alone. We look at their whole history, mom, dad, uncles, brothers, sisters, everybody, and how they've been impacted and who's got the most influence there, and really try to go towards, think of, here's a quick technique I can give people. Ask yourself, who's somebody in your life that you grew up with or that you just, and it could be at any point in your life, that really you look up to, and just what about them makes you feel good about them and being with them. And then who in your life makes you feel not so great, and who, then really look at those people and think, what qualities about them are the things that make them feel that way to you? When you can really look at the good person that you feel is like, that's the person that you want in your life versus the person that you've had in your life that has not made you feel good. If you start getting those qualities in your mind and you're sitting in front of someone, you can start asking those questions. Because I have a lot of people that are dating in their 30s, which is, because the trend is much later. And I have people ask their when they go out on dates, none of this like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's more about, hey, how do you feel about like, having children? How do you feel about, your own mother or your own father? Like what was, I asked them to ask questions that would be not the norm, because normal dating questions are going to pull you towards what you want to hear. They're self-selected. I want to hear the good thing. So I'm going to ask the good thing. And I know I'm going to get the good answer because everyone's in the honeymoon period. But if you right out of the gate and you're in your 30s and you're looking at this point, like you want a life with someone, you don't have time to sit around and play that game, because you end up playing the game of, oh, I pulled for the wrong person over and over and over again. So it's about, what is it that you want in the next like 6 months? Like, are you, do you have a job? Do you live with your mother? Like things like that. It's like, do you, what are you doing? Do you have a 401k? Do you value money in retirement? Like these are important things, because a lot of times when you grow up in a family that, say, and I see this a lot, families that their parents are working still in their 70s and 80s, and they don't really have any they don't have any savings, they don't have any retirement, all that stuff. And you will pull for people that do the same thing. And you have to be like, okay, what is it about that? And if a person, when you're asking them, has a hesitancy, or I'm not good with money, or I like to spend money and all this stuff, and you get, that's probably not the person for you. They might be cute and they might be whatever, but you got to take it seriously, because this is part of that growth and advocacy piece of advocate for yourself, because you're worth more. You deserve more. You deserve better. If you grew up in a household where people lied to you all the time, you're likely going to pull for someone who lies to you. Mm-hmm. If you grew up with someone who's really kind, loving, and compassionate, probably going to pull for someone that's kind, loving, and compassionate around you. If you have an authoritative house, which is high in warmth and high in task expectation, and there's lots of warmth, you're going to pull for people like that. Not always, but most of the time. If you grow up in a house that has, do as I say, not as I do, authoritarian parenting, which is, high in expectation, very little warmth, you're probably going to find a spouse that has very little warmth. But when you're dating them, they will have a lot of warmth.
Right.
But as soon as you go past that cliff point, it's all of a sudden that year or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 in, and you're going, what the hell did I do? Because you're right back into it. Because you go, oh, I married my parent. I married that person, or I married my, whatever. And then there's 2 other styles of parenting, permissive and indulgent. It's usually, you don't usually marry permissive or indulgent people. Sometimes you do. Permissive and indulgent being like either you're high in warmth, low in task, right? Or you're low in task and low in warmth. You will oftentimes marry people with the low in warmth, low in task. People don't care. They love you. They love bomb you, the narcissist. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'm moving on. And now you're stuck. Especially people that get stuck, and I say stuck with, no one's ever truly stuck, but they feel stuck because they either have children or they've bound their money in together and they feel like they can't get out and separate it out and all those things. But you have to know your style of how'd you get raised, what do you get pulled towards, and what do you not want to be pulled towards in terms of friendships, relationships, and also relational relationships, because those are important things to know about yourself, but people don't know that about themselves. I go through these checklists with people when they come in for couples, or when they come in because they're struggling and they would like to have more of a social life and they really have poor friendships or limited friendships. I go right back to basics and say, okay, let's talk about these things. And people usually looking at me going, what are we doing that for? I just want a friendship. Because you can't get a friendship or you can't get a relationship until you know what you need to pull for, because you're pulling for the wrong things. And that's why you haven't been able to grow.
Your perspective about your upbringing is so weird because you have a child's perspective on it.
Right.
And for a long time, I remember my whole perspective of my upbringing changed completely when I started parenting.
Right.
It's like I thought I had the ideal upbringing. My parents paid no attention to me. If I didn't come home with the cops on my tail, they were fine. And it's like, well, that's good to an extent, but I would have preferred, they didn't know I went to college, or they didn't know I was going to college. They had no input in where I went. I went because I wanted to play hockey, Right. And it's like, that's a dumb decision. I needed some parenting at that point.
Right.
So it did, but my perspective on it changed. I thought it was idyllic when I was younger and going through it, but now it's like, no, that's not the way to go.
Right. Exactly.
Need some guidance, need some help, need some involvement. You want to know they're involved.
Well, you had that kind of sort of combo permissive, indulgent-y kind of parenting, which
no indulgence, just permissive.
Right. Well, I mean, the indulgence is that high. It's that it's, they indulged you in what you wanted, that you did what you wanted.
Yeah.
Right. And gave you permission to do it. Right. So you had that, but yes, it was more permissive for sure. Very high. And did you get warmth?
No, not a ton of warmth.
So you just got like that kind of the flat line, the flat line. Right. But you, and that sets you up for struggles with relationships. I mean, it can, and then, I would imagine, because I know you've talked about your kids. I mean, your kids have good relationships with you, and then they have good relationships with their significant others.
I went retro parenting. A lot of people go opposite of how they were raised.
Right.
And it's like, not that I went overboard and was on top of them night and day, but it's like I let them know I was involved and cared, and
well, you became more of an authoritative, right? High in warmth and high in expectations. That's reasonable to the child. You don't have like these over the top crazy expectations. You had reasonable, and then you weren't a punisher and consequencer all the time. It was, of course, psychology. We believe in natural consequences are important. Teaching kids that there are natural consequences, that things happen, discipline happens, but natural consequences are better discipline.
Yeah, it was like with my kids, like when they were fighting about bedtime. It's like, okay, you go to bed when you want to go to bed, but you're going to school in the morning.
Right, exactly.
Right? And let them discover their own consequence and let them figure it out on their own, and they did.
Right. Well, and I think that's such an important thing, because I have a couple clients right now they have 17-year-olds, and part of it is a cultural thing for 2 of them, is from the culture they come from. But they're very much about like, you have to come home, you do homework, you play piano, you structure. And And the kid is just like not wanting to do any of that. And the kid doesn't do that. And so the parent is constantly on them, on them, on them, on them, on them. And I'm just like, and they're always like, I'm failing as a parent. I'm like, you're going to feel like you're failing as a parent because you're actually getting in the way of the fact that they're 17 and a half and we're past that point. You have to just kind of go, natural consequences are coming.
Yep.
So you got to let that happen. But they feel like they have to control it. They have to be involved. They have to have hands on. And I'm like, it's too late for that.
Yeah, that was 6, 7, 8,
right.
9.
We have to be able to just say, okay, well, you have to understand that you're getting that C because you're doing that. And I'm going now to go do my thing.
Yep.
But instead, I've got these parents who are just like, the kid's still getting a C, but I said, they're still getting a C, but you're spending all this airtime on them, but they're still getting the C. So what's working? Nothing.
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? So it's that, and they're not advocating for the kid to advocate for themselves. They're in a pattern of this vicious cycle of
kind of in a rescue mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of it just being like the kid has to be able to advocate for themselves. Instead, they're just falling inward and just saying, I don't know what else to do.
I say you got to let them hit the bridge. You choose the bridges, but you got to let them hit the bridge.
Exactly. And that's, and I think, and when I say culture, like, there's very specific cultures that are about not letting kids hit the bridge. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for certain people to hands off of it and say, but if I don't steer it, then they're going to do this or they're going to do that. I'm like, yeah, but they have to be able to do that in order to learn. And then they're always like, but what if they don't learn? I'm like, well, we won't know until they hit the bridge. Right. So,
yep.
I mean, it's such, it goes back to that same
Plus,
kind
too much of this comes up at 17, 18, and it's like, it's too late.
Right.
This starts early. You can't deal with 17-year-old problems at 17.
Mm-mm.
You're doing it at 9. You're doing it at 8.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. 6. Right. And I reinforce with my class all the time that, I teach counselors how to be counselors, right? 0 to 6 years old, you're set, until you become an adult and you figure out your pains yourself, you're pretty much set on, unless you get a parent that all of a sudden realizes at 8 or 9, oh, we've got a serious problem here, which a lot of parents don't do, because they'll blame it on the kid instead of like, oh, I've got to reparent this differently. Like a lot of what I do for a living is just reparenting. I mean, and I have clients that will tell me that over the years, like, you've been like the parent I didn't have, or you are, this role model that I didn't have.
Well, a lot of it's generational. It's
right.
the way they were raised.
Right.
They don't have the skill set because they weren't given the skill set.
And that's what you see a lot of in terms of advocacy of growth, is that in advocacy and growth is that people just do what they know instead of do to grow.
Yeah.
You like that?
Yeah.
They do what they know, and they don't do to grow because they don't know that they can grow. They know what they know, and that's it. And people stay with what they, and I'm always like, you got to grow. You got to grow and learn and change and grow, and learn and change. And even if you keep repeating the same patterns, know that you're repeating them so that you can find some place to grow in that. I mean, there's growth in people who sit in the cycles still to be had, but people don't look at them and don't see it for what it is. It's like, oh, terrible, but hey, you have to be able to know that you're sitting in your own shit.
Yeah.
And people feel stuck. And I always tell people, you are not stuck. You feel stuck.
Yeah.
And everything has a way out.
Control over your outcomes.
Everything has a way out, but people don't, like in friendships is a little different. When people are, married, it's a little bit different for people because they feel like they can't, they get stuck in like the legalities or money or something like that. Or if you're in an abusive relationship, people feel like they can't because it will get too volatile, which I understand. Yeah. Or friendships, I see friendships that are worse than marriages sometimes, that people get so caught up in the not disappointing someone or feeling like they won't be liked anymore.
Yeah.
Like if they don't like you because you're saying X, Y, or Z, you're probably not a good friend in the first place.
Yeah.
And I find that's what
good
I say.
Friend recognizes your boundaries.
Right. And I see that in like young kids that are learning that, and in teenagers, you hear that all the time. Like, they won't like me. But then I've got, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds being like, but yeah, but they won't like me. I'm like, we have to break that cycle. And like, if they don't like you because you've not been able to do something, or you've said no, or you put what kind of friendship is that?
Yeah.
What kind of relationship are you really having that,
Now is a good time to find that out.
Not at 60.
No, I know, but I mean, now better than then 10 years down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and that's why I think it's important for people to know, to grow out of their own knowledge so that they can, advocate for themselves internally, have the dialogue. Like I was telling you about that person that's struggling with a 20-year ask, right? Have the concept inside of, what am I really struggling with here? Am I struggling with, like, I don't want that person to be upset with me? Do I not want to feel guilty? Why am I feeling guilty? Do I need to do that? Like, you have to know that. And
well, this gets back to, if you are the person who feels their self-worth is in their self is in helping,
right?
That's death of self, which
Right.
we avoid like the plague.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just, I think it's in addition to just the helping piece, it's also about the disappointment, people being disappointed in you. Like, I don't want you to be disappointed in me, and I'm expected to help. It's like, I'm expected to do that because I'm a daughter. I'm expected to do that because I'm a wife. I'm expected to do that because that's the thing that you're self-imposing. There, obviously at jobs, you're expected to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But when we're talking about just regular everyday relationships, is it really an expectation? It might be. You might have someone that has an expectation of you, but that doesn't mean you have to meet it. Just because someone has an expectation doesn't mean that you have to meet it. Now, are there steadfast expectations that should be in relationships? Yes. Kindness, compassion, being loving, being generous of heart, mind, and integrity, honesty, fidelity. Now, fidelity doesn't mean necessarily sexual. It means fidelity to oneself and fidelity to the friendship or the relationship of just being authentically genuine, like just being kind. I always bring it down to, if you have no other memory for all the words I've just said, kindness.
Yeah.
Be kind. And if you can't be kind, kindness kind of envelops, be honest, have integrity, have honor, have compassion, have those things. That's all growth. And if you're not that person, boy, do you have areas to grow in.
Yeah.
If you are a liar, or if you are a person who omits things, or you are a person who just does things to get by because you don't think you're transparent, those are things that you should look at. And there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so many, I call it growth edges, where you have your challenge areas. And I would say that I'm very happy to say that 99.9% of all my clients, because they self-select to come, they want to fix or work on their growth edges. They don't want to be sitting in their shit or sitting in those spaces. They want to advocate. They want growth. Especially since I started this year of you thing, I've had so many people really being like, every day is a year of me. Every day is a day for something new. For people who are listening to the podcast, and I have been, I have in my office like year of you little signs, and on my, because it's important. Are you living today for you? Are you advocating for you today?
Again, it's self-qualified, because if you're in therapy, you're looking for help.
Right.
You recognize the need for help, and you're looking for help.
Right.
That's an amazing first step.
Right. And that oftentimes people, when I say, have you done anything for you, this week, people will often skip that they're in the room. I'll say, well, you did this.
Yeah.
In addition to this, are you doing something else as well? And they'll usually say, oh, this is it. And I say, well, we got to find another thing, because this is kind of like our thing. We do this every week at 3:00 on blah, blah, blah. But what else can we do?
But think about that. It's an expense. It's a time. You're taking time from the other people you should be serving to time for yourself. No.
Yes.
You're taking time out for yourself.
Yes.
You're committing time for yourself.
Yes.
That's such a great thing. The basis, just showing up in a room.
Right. Exactly.
Life is about just showing up in many cases. But
yes, it is.
But just showing up in a room is a big step.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that, when people have been in therapy for a while, especially like I have a lot of people that have been for a while, we go into that wellness model. So then we try to add on, like, what's the next thing you can do for yourself, to make sure when it gets warm here, they get the bang for the buck of, like, they get the therapy, and then we'll go walk, those kinds of things. And because that might be the only exercise they get all week. But now I'll say, you did 2 things for yourself. you did therapy and you got to walk. So you got exercise,
Mhm.
and that's usually an impetus for them to do something else, or to, like the other day, someone left my office and I said, when you leave here, you have these 2 things to do. And then they texted me afterwards, like 2 hours later, and said, I did both things. And I was like, that's awesome. And I was like, congratulations. It's super important because you get that feeling when, and there's where the reparenting is, right? That's where people say, oh, you're always like spot on when you like get back to me, because you want to reinforce that you did a good job, because the likelihood is when you were a kid growing up, you didn't get someone that said, awesome job for that little thing. It was like, well, if you didn't run the marathon and you only ran a mile, that's not enough, right? Kind of thing. It's like, no, every little thing counts, especially when you've been struggling,
right?
Or, you haven't made the best choices or things like that. You get the kudo, but you don't get the kudo when you keep messing up, And of course, I have some clients, and people probably can relate, that they come in, they say the same thing over and over. And eventually I'll say, what are we doing? What are we doing? And they'll say, I don't know.
Is it to a point where they get to a point where they're reparenting themselves?
Yes. Well, that would be the goal, is that they integrate. So therapy is about taking what you do in the office and then being able to integrate it for yourself outside. Like I have
being mindful about it.
I have clients that will say, what would Dr. Kim say to themselves when they're out, like in situations? And for years they'll say, oh, I still say that to myself. I say, what would she say? Or what would she say for me to do right now? That's the taking and integrating, so that it's not a codependent relationship. It's about you've listened, you've integrated, you've taken what we do, what we've said, the 3 R's, right? Rational, reasonable, realistic. Are you changing your whole like dynamic because you've listened and integrated out? So so there's no death of self, because you're taking yourself out and putting yourself in the world going, I know what to do here.
No, you're refining self.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's a reparenting of yourself, through the techniques and the interventions and the different things we talk about, to know how to do that for yourself, so that I don't have to be there.
Allow
and
yourself.
it also replaces the tapes, the old tapes of the old stuff that people have said to you that you have integrated. It's still there, but when you have someone else or some other people that are working as a team with you that can help that, you're going to replace the old tapes with, that's not a good tape. I have to replace that. What would she say?
And the cycle is, do something for yourself. Feel good about it. Allow yourself to feel good about it. Right. Because a lot of people don't allow themselves to feel good about it. I'm being selfish.
Well, that's the thing, is they think, oh, I'm being selfish. This isn't good. I shouldn't do this because I'm not doing what other people would expect from me. It doesn't matter what other people expect from you. I mean, obviously, if you make a plan and you don't show and you mess up, that's different. But, show up for yourself. You got to show up for yourself first. Everyone's like, that's so cliche, but you do. If you can't show up for yourself, you're not going to be able to show up for anybody else.
That's the thing. It pays dividends for everybody else.
Right.
Rather than that one irritated, downtrodden person that they're dealing with, someone with a little bit of, self-support. Right. It's a better outcome for everybody. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's and I think that until people have, it's called
put your mask on first.
Yes. When that mask drops out of the airplane.
Yeah.
But I think it's also that whole piece of stacking wins. People don't stack their wins.
No.
And people bypass small things.
They feel guilty about their wins.
Well, oh, it's or we were taught, don't brag about things, don't talk about your accomplishments, don't speak. It's like, people come in and will actually, in my office, will whisper about something good that they've done. Like and I'll say, there's no one here but me. Yeah. You can speak full voice about that and be proud of it. And, because I'm a big cheerleader for everybody and saying like, yes, this is great. Rock star, this is great, and
hopefully you have someone in your life who can do that
too. And hopefully, and if you don't, I'm usually the one that's doing it, and whether it's, I'm texting someone like, yeah, good job, congratulations, or rock star or whatever, because people have accomplished something, that's a big deal to them, to feel good. But you have to be able to do that for yourself. And that's where therapy is helpful, or life coaching, or someone with a wellness practice that you go to that can give you those tools to be able to learn so you can do them for yourself.
Yep.
So anyway, so my growth edge for today is to encourage people to advocate for yourselves, both internally, to take yourself out of the adverse negative talk that you're doing that will create toxic relationships, and also to advocate for yourself out in the world, extending beyond yourself so that you can get what you need and what you want.
That's the last person you should allow to treat you poorly, right?
Yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Stop that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. See.
Yeah.
All right.
Epiphany.
I have aha moments, And as a side note, Catherine, you're still in school because you have to finish out before you graduate.
Yeah.
She's graduating and she's complaining about the last 5 days of doing nothing in school. Welcome to senioritis.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
all right, you guys. So have a great week. We have one more week to go here in our month of
Month of growth.
May, month of growth in May, and we will be on to June. I'll have to think of what our June will be. Hot, steamy summer growth.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I know. Well, not here, but somewhere. But everyone have a great week, and I will catch you on the other side.